It's Monday, August 28th. Welcome, everybody. John Aravosis here at the Aravosis Report, coming to you live from from Chicago. I was going to say Washington, D.C. Normally, I'm in Washington, D.C., but I'm still visiting Chicago for another 2 weeks. How's everybody doing? Happy Monday, all, as we get rolling here. Speaking of which, I will get rolling on my TikTok here. Okay, go live. Boom, that should work it. And introduce yourselves, guys, if you would. I always like you kind of say where you're from, which is kind of a nice thing for anybody who's new here to see folks are from all over. Here we go, TikTok. Yes. Excellent. All right. Anyway, good amount of news today. I'm looking at here we go. Getting my notes in order here. There we go. Okay, now my notes are in order. Excellent. Anyway, yes, good amount of news today. So as always, I will start with the news and then take your guys' questions. But let's wait a minute. Thank you, John. We'll wait a minute for folks to arrive, since they just got the notice sort of the second we go live. Oh, Fluffy's birthday. Hey, Fluffy. Happy birthday, Fluffy. Everybody give Fluffy a happy birthday. I don't think there's another thing we need. I need to look for birthday gift emojis. That's a good idea. Gift. I'm writing this down if I can remember. Gift emojis. Unless they're already, well, on TikTok, they may already be. I'm hitting the wrong button here. I don't know about you guys on YouTube. Actually, we like the YouTube emojis, so there aren't that many, I think. Oh, flip the camera on TikTok. Good point. Thank you, Jetta. There we go. See, there we go. See, you forget these things when you don't when I don't have a show for you guys. Fuck. Woo, Gloucestershire. Thank you, Elizabeth. Good to see you. Anyway, so yeah, so woo. Exciting. Thank you, Chad. Good to see you. Liz, thank you. So, yeah, and everybody who had won the auctions the last, I finally relay on that. Thank you, Jay. It's a little slower when I'm like in Chicago. In DC, it's like 2 blocks away, so it's a lot easier. Post office. Thank you, user 336. All the TikTok gifts coming in. Thanks, guys. All right, guys. Thank you, Lee. So I will I'll get rolling, and then we can well, since I always start with a few shopkeeping, what was I gonna say? Housekeeping, whatever you call it. So welcome, guys. I am John Aravosis. This is the Aravosis Report. Thank you, Happy Beach and Elizabeth. Coming to you live from Chicago. Cover the latest news from the war in Ukraine. The way the show works is I go through the news that I've sort of accumulated throughout the day. Thank you, Rifa. And then second half of the show, take your guys' questions. For anybody who's just got to ask a question now, super chats on YouTube work. Some TikTok's got to come up with a super chat option. But on YouTube, you can pose a super chat question where you pay for it, but it is basically a gift for me. And I will get to your question as the next thing I talk about as a guarantee. Otherwise, I certainly try to get to other questions. Thank you, Ellie. I just can't get to everything, but super chats as a thank you, I always will. Super stickers are just another way of giving a gift. For you guys, you can do the gifts on the screen, which you guys already know, like Ellie's heart she gave me. I really appreciate the gifts because, as I said, I do this full time. It's my job. So basically, the way I pay my bills is your guys' gifts. So thank you for that. And that's about it. So thank you, Ali, for the TikTok gift. Let me get rolling then. All right. So today is day 550 of Vladimir Putin's 3-day special military operation in Ukraine. I figured I'd start with a counteroffensive update. Getting interesting. So, the map. I was going to say I need a map. Oh, so as I've been saying over the last few days, things are getting more interesting, which is good for Ukraine. Ukrainians are about here on the map or so. Well, okay. Several areas the Ukrainians are fighting, and we know this, okay? Here around the river, over here. Biggest battle, or I would say most important at this point, right around here. Another big, important battle around here. Battle here at Bakhmut. Ukrainians think it's important. We in the West, less so. And then up here, Kupiansk, which is the wild card, which is the one the Russians themselves, sort of an offensive. The Russians have started to try to throw the Ukrainians sort of off their balance. We're going to talk a lot about this one to start with, because this is the one where interesting stuff has been happening and where we've been getting good news over the last several days. So basically, Ukrainian forces have liberated the town of Rabot. That area there southeast the village. Now, one possibility was, well, basically, you've got Ukraine over here, okay? They want to get down to Melitopol, basically, Ukraine wants to cut the Russian occupation in half. The Russian occupation includes Crimea here, this province here, this province here, this province, and like this province, more or less. So imagine all of this is occupied, with my fingers here, by Russia. So Ukraine at some point wants to cut the occupation in half to make it much harder for the Russians to defend and get supplies to those areas. Well, the battles going on around here in the east probably are meant to either hit down here to Mariupol or hit down here to Berdyansk. So basically cutting it in half like this or cutting it in half like this. The one that's further to the west here, this is, again, the big battle that's been happening, sort of the most famous one at this point, I would say, where all the media is paying attention, where the biggest successes have been happening in the last few days. This battle is probably to come down here to Melitopol. So it'd be cutting it in half here. So the Ukrainians are around here. They could be going directly south eventually. Well, basically, they want to come south eventually with their about, I think it's only 18 miles, but again, it's 18 miles of landmines and trenches. So it's not like it's a quick walk. Next biggest town they want to get is Tokmak. Thank you, Succeed, for that. And then after Tokmak, they want to go down to, they want to hit Melitopol itself. So Tokmak is a really big town they're trying to get next, and then Melitopol. Now, let me look here. Oh, Sister says it's buffering on YouTube. Anybody else buffering on YouTube, or is YouTube coming across okay? YouTubers, let me know. Beep, beep. It always takes like a couple seconds because I'm like, you guys are delayed. You're like delayed 5 or 6 seconds from where I am. So YouTubers, how are we doing? Lagging? You know what? I'm going to reboot YouTube. All right, I'm going to reboot YouTube. One second. All right, there we go. I'm going to make sure my mic is correct on YouTube. It is. All right, well, that's the best I can do on YouTube. Hopefully YouTube's going a little better here. Thank you, Lee. All right, YouTubers, I hope that helped. No guarantees. All right, so the deal is Ukraine needs to come down, hit Tokmak, and then come down further and hit Melitopol. Now, the Russians know this. Thank you, Pam, for the AFLAC. The Russians know this. So they've put a lot of their defenses there. So what the Ukrainians are currently doing is they seem to be kind of trying to go around the defenses a little bit. Instead of coming directly south or southwest, which would make more sense, right? From here, you kind of go south-southwest here, south-southwest here. They're going a little more southeast. So they're trying to avoid sort of some of the Russian defenses by going a touch more southeast, but still, it's going south overall. Ukraine believes Robotine, which is the town they just captured. I've got some of these quotes here from, I'm trying to think. This might be from Sky News. I'm not sure. Ukraine believes Robotine is a strategic location as it sits on an important road towards Tokmak, which I just told you about, a Russian-occupied road and rail hub. Thank you, Ellen. As for next steps, one report said they're going around, as I said, the tough defenses, so they're kind of going southeast a little bit instead of southwest. Michael Clark on Sky News says that Tokmak is the next major target and will be a big battle to watch out for, meaning that's the next sort of big battle we've got for trying to figure. Thank you, Myri, for the duck. That's the next big battle we've got that the Ukrainians are going to be having that we got to keep an eye on. Thank you, Denon. Per the New York Times, satellite images show that to reach Tokmak, Ukrainian forces will have to breach 2 more Russian defensive lines made up of trenches, dense minefields, earthen berms, and anti-tank barriers. Now, another really interesting story going on right now is Russia's got I always try to watch the language here. I never want to sort of screw things up for the filter, the automatic filters out there. But Russia has a neo-NZ problem. Okay, let's put it that way. A neo-NZ problem. Now, what that is Russia, one of big surprise here, okay, because from the beginning, Putin has claimed that this is a battle to stop the Nazis in Ukraine, that Ukraine is a Nazi government and he's here to save the world from them, right? And everyone's going, Zelensky, the president of Ukraine's Jewish, so he's not a Nazi. His family died in World War II. Definitely not a Nazi, right? The Russians, on the other hand, do actually have a history of working with Nazis. They've done it a lot, actually, in terms of going after the LGBT community, the sort of gay and trans community in Russia. partnered with neo-Nazis to do that just in the last 10 years, really. Thank you, Marie. I've written a lot about that myself in the past. And this is really interesting. So it looks like the group that might take over for Wagner, meaning the next big mercenary group, is a group called Rusich, okay? Their leader was in Finland. I'm not sure why, but he was visiting in Finland. And the Ukrainians called for his arrest and him being extradited, right? Well, what happens? Oh, I've got to, if the phone goes off one more time, I'm going to grab it and turn it off. Calls for him to be extradited, and the Finns arrest this guy. Well, they're now livid. Thank you, Ernie and Elizabeth. The Rusich guys are livid that their commander, their top guy of this paramilitary group, has been arrested, and they are insisting that they will no longer fight. Yeah, thank you for the flag. Exactly. Thank you, Leif, as well, for the hearts. They will no longer fight in Ukraine until their leader is released, because they say they don't think Putin's doing enough to get their leader released. And if Putin won't fight for them, they won't fight for him. The problem is these guys, it is believed that the major force of these guys are fighting near Robotine, which is the big victory that I just got done telling you about, that Ukraine just had right? The big victory that Ukraine had here, which is now preparing them to head further south, is Robotine. That's where these guys are fighting. Okay, Red Watts, these neo-Nazis who now are refusing to fight. Now, they are a neo-Nazi group. They were formed as a neo-Nazi group. I know I'm using the word. It's hard to avoid it. Back in 2014. As I said, it's great. I mean, it's absolutely great. Putin cannot afford to lose these guys. As I've told you guys before, one of the really interesting things that's been going on now is the Russians don't have any troops in reserve. They've got all their men deployed, right? So when it comes down to it, in terms of the fighting getting more intense here and Ukraine having more success, the Russians have now been moving more troops in this area, but they've been taking troops from elsewhere fighting in Ukraine and put them here instead, which now makes their other forces weaker, right? Because they have fewer forces here. Well, the fact that these guys who are fighting here, these neo-Nazis, are now saying they're not going to fight anymore, Russia has no men to replace them with. If they take men from anywhere else, it will weaken the battles going on in the other places. So great news across the board, but also, and again, important to me, because also what's important here is that they're a neo-Nazi group that's fighting for Vladimir Putin in Ukraine. The unit was literally formed as a neo-Nazi unit, and the Russians have zero problem with these guys. Thank you, Nicola. Zero problem, and the Wagner guys as well. Yeah, some of the guys, the number 2 Wagner guy, thank you, Gene, also who ended up dying in the plane crash with Prigozhin, had SS tattoos right on the back of his neck. The SS is the Nazi, what would you call them? Were they the special forces? Whatever, but nasty Nazi guys, the SS, right on the back of his neck. Unbelievable. Rusich, they're called Rusich. So big attack this weekend on a Russian airbase in Kursk. I don't remember on Friday if I showed you guys this. It may have happened. I think it did happen on Saturday. It happened on Saturday, right? So you guys didn't see this. I think, you know what it was? I think I showed our Saturday show that I do for the paid subscribers. I showed you guys, which is why I was forgetting. So Kursk region, more or less up here-ish from Ukraine. Okay, so here's Ukraine, here's Kharkiv, so up here. And the Ukrainians up here, at least according to the Ukrainians, they shot a number of drones, launched a number of drones at the region, maybe 15 or something. The Russians only shot down 3 of them. So around 12 or so drones got through, hit a Russian airbase, military airbase, and the Ukrainians took out of commission, they say, 4 Su-30 planes and 1 MiG-29 plane at the airfield. A defense system and 2 missile launchers were also reportedly damaged. Thank you, Courtney. We can't confirm this, but I will say I have not seen a lot of instances of the Ukrainians actually lying about the military damage they do. We just haven't seen many instances of that. So thank you, Gamma. So even though we can't confirm this, I'm going to take them at their word because they've told the truth before. Thank you, Chris. But that was a big deal. 2 Moscow airports shut down again overnight. Some of them shut down this weekend too. Ukraine has pretty much, not statistically, but they've been pretty much going after Moscow with drones every night. And every night they do it, it shuts down at least 2 of the 4, sometimes all 4 of the Moscow airports. Now, about is very interesting. The thing is, I don't know. Thank you, Carol. I don't know when it comes to the drones and who's launching them. My guess is it's riskier doing it during the day. Thank you, Adam. Because the problem is, first of all, we believe that the people are probably doing it from Russia itself. They're not doing it from Ukraine. If they're doing it from Russia itself, they could be Russians, could be near Moscow, be in Moscow. And during the day, I suspect it's a lot easier to see some guy holding a 5-foot drone or whatever it is right in the middle of the street versus it's 2 a.m. or something and nobody's out, right? So having said that, I think it would be very interesting if Ukraine could manage to pull off, honestly, all they need to do is pull off one spectacular attack during the day. It was like in an airport. I mean, if Ukraine were to do an attack on the Moscow airports during the day, it would end up making the airports unsafe for any flights. Let's see if they do it. Now, the problem is, I said, I don't know whether they can, whether whoever is doing these attacks, it would be too obvious. And I do see on YouTube that it broke up again. There's nothing I can really do. The internet is just being hinky. Nothing we can do about it. Sorry, guys. It's being weird tonight. You know, when I broadcast from Chicago, it's not my usual internet. So, you know, I can, you know what I'll do? Sorry, we're having issues here. I can, one more time, I will, actually, yeah, one more time. I'm going to redo my, my YouTube connection. One talker. Bizarre. Wow. Okay. All right. I'm back. I'm back. All right. Sorry about that, guys. Damn Wi-Fi being evil. Probably not router because I'm back. Anyway, I'm back, guys. I'm back. So, but that was really good about the attack. The Moscow airports I was talking about. Kupiansk. So Kupiansk is where the Russians are doing their own offensive, really. So Kupiansk, north, around here, okay? And the Russians basically have been pushing back against the Ukrainians, trying to get back the town of Kupiansk and the region. Well, a number of reasons, but really I would say the number one reason, thank you, Nicola, the number one reason is they're trying to sort of put the Ukrainians sort of off balance, right? The Ukrainians really want to get either here or here and cut the Russian occupation in half. So what are the Russians doing? The Russians are putting 100,000 men, which is a lot in this war, up here and fighting, going across, or actually probably down, but actually, excuse me, down and maybe over from here, but trying to push back against the Ukrainians, in part in order to force the Ukrainians to move men up here, to move men and women. Whether they move them from Bakhmut or the counteroffensive, thank you guys, thank you Dora and Bonnie. It's to weaken the Ukrainian counteroffensive by forcing the Ukrainians to put troops up there. Now, the latest on Kupiansk, as I said, about 100,000 troops, according to one Ukrainian official. It has significantly stepped up the frequency. Russia has significantly stepped up the frequency of attacks. Thank you, Suzanne, and airstrikes in the area. So, you know, keep an eye on it. It's an interesting conundrum. Still being weird today. Oh well, it's an interesting conundrum for the Ukrainians because they don't want to take away from the counteroffensive, but they also don't want to let the Russians sort of advance there. And by the way, you guys on YouTube, what I actually think is going on, I use a streaming service, StreamYard, to beam to a number of different services. And I think StreamYard's probably having issues, which is why it's not connecting well for you guys. So sorry about that. Few more topics here. Actually, really quick, I will do a quick pitch for my memberships, etc. Thank you, Martin. So one of the ways that you guys can help me out And as I said, I do this full time. I do it for free. Thank you, Maocab, Maocab and JS. Is I do this for free. So basically, in order to pay the bills and keep doing it, I hit you guys up for gifts. I appreciate you guys helping out. You can help out with just direct donations. There's a number of different ways. On TikTok, you can go to the link in my profile, click it, and you'll see Cash App and PayPal and Venmo and all that stuff. Same thing for you guys. Aravosis.com will take you to my list of links, give you all that stuff. Another way you can do it is memberships. This is something where a decent number of folks do this. I try to sort of get maybe at least one person a show or so to join me to do this. Thank you, Timothy. But basically, you can become, thank you, Kevin. You can become, and Sean, you can become a member on TikTok, TikTok subscriber. There should be a little symbol. You guys told me before, is it at the bottom near the comment box? There's some kind of a symbol, maybe a dollar. Is it a dollar sign? I don't know what it is, but the mods can tell you that's how you become a TikTok subscriber. You can become a YouTube subscriber. The folks whose names are in green, like Luna there, are folks who are subscribing and basically helping out month by month. And it gives an automatic month-by-month donation. Same thing for the TikTok subscribers. It's a month-by-month donation. And it's just month, and you can whenever you want, but it helps me out because it makes the income a little more steady. You get things like special emojis, but basically bottom line is you get knowing that you're helping me out. Now, there's a couple other servers. Ko-fi, got that link on YouTube as well, Twitch, etc. You guys have that. Thank you, AJ. He did 863 showing all the different emojis, and thank you, Danan, as well. But any of these services you subscribe to, Ko-fi, you can subscribe on Twitch, you can subscribe on Discord itself. Any of the monthly subscriptions will also give you access to my Saturday show. I do a Saturday show as a thank you, kind of a wrap up for the week. And we also invite my friend Vlad in Ukraine, who joins us most Saturdays. And we just talk about the latest news, but amongst ourselves. And it's a nice kind of coffee talk group, much more small, much more intimate, and it's only for the paid subscribers. So that's one of the things you get. But honestly, the biggest thing you get is knowing you're helping me out, which I would appreciate. So if you can afford it, consider doing it. The mods can sort of tell you where to go. But as I said, basically on TikTok, you can do the subscribers on the screen with the star, or you can go to the link in my profile and you'll see lots of options there. Same thing for you guys. You can become YouTube subscribers, or my profile, aravosis.com is the link for YouTube, etc. That shows you all my links. All right, guys, let's keep going. Russian investigators came out yesterday and said that Yevgeny Prigozhin, the head of the Wagner Group, is in fact dead, that the Russian DNA test showed that he was on the plane, as were the other 9 people listed in the manifest. U.S. is now saying it is very likely that Prigozhin was on the plane. I think sort of the analysis from the U.S. is Russia lies about everything, quite literally. There's nothing you can trust them with, but it's not clear why Putin would lie about this, right? I mean, Prigozhin would want to lie about being on the plane because he'd want to, basically make it look like he died, and maybe Putin will leave him alone, right? Thank you, Dawn. But if you're Putin, why would you want to pretend like Prigozhin wasn't on the plane? I mean, you already tried to kill him. I mean, you already blew up the plane. So if he's on the plane, I mean, if he's not on the plane, why would you lie and say you found the genes that he's on the plane? I don't think it makes sense entirely. I mean, it's a little too convoluted, is my point here. So I think at this point we're going to go with Prigozhin's dead. Thank you, Malcab, for that. There's really no other news on that front. As I said, I'm going to be very curious to see where things go from here, because I think Prigozhin being killed by Putin helps Putin in the short run because he gets rid of an adversary. It makes Putin look strong. It tells other potential usurpers that they better watch it because Putin will kill them. But it also creates some divisions because there were, I think it's like 12 or more, or maybe it was even 24 memorials around Russia to Prigozhin and his men. These guys like these folks. Putin's base, which is sort of the far-right nationalists, they love Prigozhin. So Putin has really caused some friction here, even in his own military, because a lot of the military guys like the Wagner guys. A lot of the Wagner guys were former military. There's a lot of friction. And finally, you got the 20,000 Wagner guys themselves. They're still around. And you've got to worry about them. Have you just pissed them off? Certainly. I don't know that they're going to make an attack on Moscow again. Thank you, Ellie. But if I were Putin, I would be very worried that some of those Wagner guys may form their own terrorist cell. They may decide to get revenge. I mean, think if it was you, right? Especially if you're a military guy, right? And your fellow military guys get murdered by the government. You don't think you're going to be wanting to take a little revenge? Military? Also, the point too about the military guys is they have the capacity right? I don't have capacity to get revenge, violent revenge on the government. How am I going to do it, right? But if you're former military, you've got a much better capacity to do it because you know how to do these things. They need access to weapons. They need money. But, Ukraine could finance that, for example. Maybe other, foreign intelligence services, but they'd want, I think for the U.S., for example, I don't think Biden would want to be financing terrorism. Interesting. Grain update. So this is interesting too. You know that the Russians have been stopping Ukrainian grain exports. Okay. Ukraine has now managed to get the second ship out today, which was very interesting, and untouched by the Russians. So what Ukraine's been doing is they've been hugging their own coast, right? So this is Ukrainian coast. This is the Black Sea. So by Turkey, Romania, Bulgaria, etc., Moldova, and they've been hugging the coast here. They've got sea mines, Ukrainians have mines here, minefield. The Ukrainians know how to get through the minefield. So they've been like escorting the tankers through the minefield so they won't get hit. But the Russians don't know where the mines are. So the idea is it stops the Russians from coming in to board the ships. Then they get down here and they enter Romanian waters because Romania is here. Then they go further and they enter Bulgarian waters. So they're hugging the coast. And then once they get through Bulgarian waters, they enter Turkish waters and then go through the Straits of Bosporus or whatever it's called. And then they're in the Aegean and they could be in Greek waters and Turkish waters. But bottom line is they hug the coast and they're in NATO waters the entire time. That means Russia can't fire on the ships in NATO waters because they'd be firing in NATO territory or on NATO territory. They can't go in there to physically stop the ships because they'd be illegally entering NATO territory. Stop them. So this second ship, it's a Liberian vessel, it's heading to Senegal. It is now, I think, off of Bulgaria. Do I have it here? Yes, it's now off of the coast of Bulgaria, so it already made it past Romania, and it hasn't been touched. So very interesting what the Ukrainians are doing, and Zelensky is saying this could be a model now for, exporting Ukrainian grain and everything. Let's see. I mean, some of it is going to depend on whether the people manning the ships, whether the people buying the grain, for example, are going to be, risk prone enough to do this without worrying that the ship's going to get blown up. And the insurance companies don't charge an arm and a leg for it because they think it's just too expensive, right? It's too great of a risk, but very interesting. An ATACMS update. So this is the weapon system that a lot of Americans have been saying they want Biden to give Ukraine. They are basically longer range missiles that are fired from the HIMARS system. And they would be very useful for Ukraine in order to go after Russia's supply routes and things like this. Well, Biden administration has been refusing to do it. Thank you, Super Hornet. They've been giving a lot of different excuses. At first, the Biden administration was saying, well, the range is too far, and we're afraid that the Ukrainians would use it to hit the Russians. Well, now the Brits have provided cruise missiles that go even farther, and the French have provided cruise missiles that go even farther. So now the idea of, if Ukraine gets missiles that go that far, they will per se attack Russia directly. They're not, right? So that argument's out the window. Then the administration started claiming, this is cute. The little ice cream guys driving by. How cute. I haven't heard like an ice cream truck drive by in years. I mean, because in DC, it's not like I hear one in my apartment. That's very funny here in Chicago area, hearing that. Very funny. The ATACMS. Now the administration is saying, they keep coming with different excuses. Now they're saying, one, we don't have enough to make a difference. So we don't have enough to give Ukraine. So why give them any, right? Which I kind of love that argument. You could give them some. General Ben Hodges this weekend, a former American general, came out and said, this is BS. When I read that argument in the Financial Times, this is BS that they don't have enough. So gosh, we'd love to give Ukraine the weapons. We don't have enough. He said, if you don't have enough, then you would have put in a requisition for more of them. You would have contacted our defense industries and said, we need more of these, start making more. They're not doing that. Biden's not doing that. So clearly it's not that we don't have enough. And the same don't have enough, by the way, also fits with this argument of, we're going to need them for war with China and Taiwan, so we don't want to spend them on Ukraine. A lot of the defense guys say that's not true. You wouldn't use them in Taiwan, but even if you would, then make more of them. How hard is it, right? The second argument, you're going to love this one. This is the classic. Let me pull this up so I can read it. The second is that if we give these long-range missiles to Kyiv, the Ukrainians, quote, it could escalate the conflict with Russia. As I've asked about before, what does that actually mean? It's a buzzword. It's meant to make us, shake in our boots and say, well, nobody wants to escalate with Russia, right? We're all supposed to accept that as some kind of truism, right? What does that mean to escalate with Russia, right? I mean, somehow it means do more than we're doing currently. Okay, but didn't we escalate every step of the way, right? We weren't giving them HIMARS, then we were giving them HIMARS. I think initially we weren't even giving them Stingers, right? We weren't giving them Patriot missiles, then we are. We weren't going to give them tanks, now we are. The tanks may start arriving actually in the next week, some American tanks might arrive, right? We weren't going to give them F-16s, now we are. Each step, the Brits weren't going to give them cruise missiles. Now they are, and they've been using them effectively. The French weren't going to give cruise. I mean, every step of the way, we have escalated, and I haven't seen any nukes come flying from Putin. But especially what bothers me is these missiles go less distance than the ones the French and the Germans. Thank you, Danan. Less far than the ones the French and the Germans have given the Ukrainians. But somehow these missiles are going to cause Putin to go nuclear? So I mean, I'm sorry, but I agree with Ben Hodges, our general. This is BS. I mean, this is just a BS excuse. And now I will say, I think absolutely positively, the Biden is worried about escalation. I think that's exactly the reason. He thinks, this is going to piss off Putin. He'll use nukes. Who knows? Well, but again, why exactly would he do that? I mean, I'm sorry. I don't mean to diminish the nuclear threat, because the folks who think about this every day say, you should never diminish it out of hand. Okay, fair enough. But Putin's not going to nuke us because we'll nuke him back. And I mean, literally, as many Russians will die as Americans, or as many Russians as Brits will die if they nuke Great Britain or whomever, the other folks who have nukes. The Brits have nukes, the French have nukes. So that's not going to happen. Is Putin going to use nukes in Ukraine? Why? The military folks say zero benefit to him using nukes there. Second of all, if Putin uses nukes in Ukraine, there's a very good argument that that's an Article 5 violation, which means he goes to war with Ukraine. He goes to war with NATO by doing it because of all the NATO countries on the border. Third, I would argue, if Putin uses nukes in Ukraine on the NATO borders, we're entering that war anyway. We may not be entering it, literally entering it. We may not declare war on Russia, but I think we're going to have a no-fly zone. We're going to do all sorts of things that mean Putin's in serious trouble. If you're Vladimir Putin, and you think about, but again, one of the things they taught us in graduate school at Georgetown, I did a master's degree in foreign service, which is international public policy, but focusing on U.S. policy decision-making. And everything, these issues, for example, I'm talking about with you, everything we did at Georgetown was going through role play. So you didn't just sit here and sort of say, we should do this or whatever. You had to play the official and play the other official. I, for example, got to play the North Vietnamese during the Vietnam War. Thank you, Randy. And play, think of what were their motivations, right? And you sit there and you play Vladimir Putin. And Biden gives these rockets to Ukraine, missiles to Ukraine. And you're going to launch a nuke in Ukraine when militarily it doesn't benefit you to launch the nuke. It's not going to change anything. B, you're literally nuking your own territory, because remember, Putin says all of this is Russia. So you're going to nuke your own people and your own territory? Doubtful. 3, as I said, you're going to risk NATO entering the war. NATO is going to, if Putin uses a nuke, NATO is going to have to go ballistic in response, because otherwise we are telling every country out there that you can use nukes, right? If Putin uses a nuke, we are telling everyone out there you can use nukes too. So NATO's going to have to go. So if I'm Putin, I'm going, why the hell do I want NATO to enter? I don't want NATO to enter the war. This is day, what did I say, 550 or something of the war? It was supposed to be a 3-day war. I want NATO entering the war now? Are you kidding me? Right? So I really have to quibble with any kind of an argument about we should be afraid of Russia, of escalating with Russia. Why? And I still, honestly, I've not heard a good argument about it. I hear people sort of tell me, nuclear war. I'm like, well, what does that mean? Nuclear war. Why? Putin, and I always say this, Putin's a jerk, but he's not crazy. He's not crazy. So anyway, it so annoys me. And by the way, guys, there's zero I can do about the quality on YouTube elsewhere. So I'd appreciate it if you don't let me know anymore, because it distracts me. I appreciate you telling me, but just let it go at this point, because there's nothing I can do about it. So Um, there's clearly the StreamYard service I use is having a problem today. So sorry about that. All right, guys. A few more topics here. An expert group put together to look at Russian sanctions and how the Russians were getting around them found that 60% of Russia's of the let me read it. Examined 174 foreign components from 3 drone models the Russians were using. So they looked at 3 different models the Russians were using of drones. They found 174 foreign components in there, components that should have been banned. And they found that 60% of them had come from China. So basically, China is helping Russia get around the ban of all of the technical components that go in the drones. So interesting story. No other news on that, but interesting that that's happening. Ukraine's state-owned oil and gas giant says it has accumulated 14 billion cubic meters of gas reserves, natural gas, which it needed by the end of the summer to get through the winter. So that's good because they're basically expecting the Russians to blow up, all the energy facilities again this winter to try to freeze the Ukrainians to death, which is a war crime, by the way. But they've at least got enough natural gas saved, which is good. So that's good. Final point was Ukrainian elections. Zelensky was talking to Senator Lindsey Graham, who I think was in Ukraine again, and talking about elections. And I think Graham might have been saying, you really ought to have your presidential elections that I think maybe they're due next year or something. Ukraine, by its law, it can't have elections while martial law is invoked. Zelensky said, we would certainly I would consider going to parliament and having them adjust the law to allow us to have the elections. But in order to do it, I forget the exact number, whether it was 1.5 billion. It was a huge amount of money in the billions. He said Ukraine would need in order to safely have these elections. Mind you, how do you even have elections when Russia's occupying 17% of your country? It gets difficult. How do you have elections when 25% of your population is living somewhere else? So in the country, 25% of Ukrainians are displaced. They had to move to a different part of Ukraine, right? Having an election, a little difficult because where do you live? How do you have an election when 3 million Ukrainians, almost 10%, a little less than 10%, are living abroad because they're refugees? I mean, it gets incredibly difficult. And what Zelensky said was he can't justify billions of dollars on elections when the war is going on and the money has every penny has got to be spent on defending the country and getting their land back. So he said, if the West can come together and cash for Ukraine's elections, they'll do it. But otherwise, Ukraine can't afford it, which I thought was very interesting. Thank you, Mundashi. I appreciate that. That was sweet of you. Thank you. I've actually wanted to. I've seen it before because it goes by the local school. I've seen it with my dog, and I was like, whoa. Always like there was some chocolatey Eclair, I think is what it was called. The ice cream thing with a big hard piece of chocolate on the inside. Oh, nice. Anyway, interesting sort of thing on Ukrainian elections. And that is it. All right, guys, let me, I will show you really quick our auction items for the week. A couple of them. We've got our auctions on Discord. As you know, we've got a Discord. It's discord.aravosis.com. It's free. We've got auctions we put there, which basically are we use to a couple different things. One, I like auctioning off cool stuff from Ukraine because I think it helps sort of promote Ukraine, sort of the brand, so to speak, out there, the culture. Second of all, I take 50% of the auction proceeds and we channel it back into helping Ukraine. Lately, we have been buying camouflage nets for the Ukrainian military to spec based on what the military specifically has asked. So your 50% of your winning bid has been going to that. The other 50% goes to support me because I do this full time and literally I don't take money from anywhere else. So in order to be able to do this, since I'm not rich, I've been trying to find creative ways to pay my bills. That's one of them. So we've got about 8 auction items this week. The auctions end on Wednesday. You'll find them over on Discord. Just be aware that the public auctions are for everybody. The VIP auctions are for the paid subscribers, the monthly subscribers. But real quick, we've got the Azov-style bracelet. Very cool. These are neat. They're not made anymore. They're made by the Ukrainian government, and they're from the last batch of steel from the Azov-style steel plant. You can see the Ukrainian trident there. These, the Ukrainian government made in order as a sort of memento commemorating the battle that was fought at that steel plant. This was the steel plant where 2,000 Ukrainian troops held off 14,000 Russians for like 2 months. So they made these bracelets out of the last batch of steel from the plant, which is kind of neat. Thank you, Chad. And they're made by the Ukrainian government. So very cool. Second, this has been a very popular little thing, a real Ukrainian military patch, Velcro on the back. It's new. It's not used. I kind of prefer the used ones, but the used ones are harder to get because obviously they're on Ukrainian soldiers. But this is really cool. Vlad got it in Ukraine. So these are neat. Obviously, the Ukrainian flag, the most popular patch, I will say. This is the #1 patch you will see on every Ukrainian soldier for obvious reasons. Number 2 are the Trident ones, which we also do have, but I don't have those auctioning this week. And then finally, the other item I really like is this Ukrainian Christmas ornament. This one's of a cat, but it's of the traditional Ukrainian style, which is really neat. That I just find I've always liked this style. The Russians have a similar technique. I've got some Russian. They're the same on both sides, but I've got some Russian bowls like this that are really beautiful. I got in the Russian Far East back in the early 1990s when I was there. It was really neat. But anyway, I think it's very pretty. So, and I'm going to get more, so we have enough, because somebody reminded me and said you need to get more, so we have enough to buy Christmas gifts. I do have more of the socks. I don't have for auction this week. No, I don't think I've got the socks up for auction. I'm looking right here. No. I'll have more socks next week though, but it's very pretty. It's really pretty. But anyway, all of those things, it's cool Ukrainian stuff. But as I said, what's neat about it too is 50% of the money goes back to Ukraine. So this money right here, 50% of it will go to buy camouflage nets for the Ukrainian military. And the other 50% goes to support me, which is also a good cause. So if you can, I'd appreciate it. Thank you, JRD. And please do keep the gifts coming on TikTok and YouTube. So let's do questions, guys, or comments or whatever. What's going on? What would you like to talk about? You can put the comments here on TikTok. You guys know how to do it on YouTube and everywhere else at the bottom of the screen. Thank you, Chris, for the glasses. Woo! So what's going on? What else? Casualties on both sides. There were estimates on that recently, actually. Thank you, Lysania. I appreciate that. Oh, Gerom Slava. The estimates, oh boy. A few weeks ago, there were new estimates. The Russian estimates were, God help me out, guys, something like, was it 240,000 casualties, something like that, with maybe 70,000 dead for sure. Thank you, Joe. Let me get to that in a second. I don't have the numbers, guys. I don't have the numbers. The Russians basically had around 70,000 dead, and the rest were injured. 260, but there was it came out over there, and the Ukrainian numbers were certainly better than the Russian, but they're still high. I mean, because the thing with Ukraine you've got to realize is, even though the number of deaths are fewer than the Russian deaths, Ukraine is a smaller country than Russia, right? So you've got, I mean, in other words, Ukraine is like 1/4 to 1/5 the size of Russia. Ukraine's like 43 million people. Russia's 153 million people. So Ukraine has fewer deaths, but Russia has more people. So, it kind of evens out. There's a lot of death and injury on both sides, basically, which is not surprising. We kind of knew that, Joe, couldn't decide between YouTube and TikTok subscription, but missed visually seeing yours and Vlad's faces Saturday morning. So back to TikTok. Thank you, Joe. I appreciate that. And Vlad's been joining us, other than when he wasn't feeling well, but actually, or traveling. He was doing some trainings for people, actually. But Vlad joined us again this week with his daughter at the end, which was very cute. Vicky joined us. Vlad has a little 4-year-old daughter who's blonde and adorable. This little blonde, adorable Slavic kid, you can imagine. Beautiful little girl, 4 years old, and she's shy and then hogs the camera at the end. It's very cute. Thank you, Mark, for that. And Vicky. Speaking of Vicky, but it's absolutely adorable. Yeah, she's a trip. What else, guys? What else? Yeah, Vlad's great. New York Times says 300,000 casualties with 120,000 dead. Oh, wow. Is that, I don't remember what the number was, Jake. Is that what it's up to now? I mean, I know it was high for the Russians. And again, Ukraine has fewer, but still a lot. But I don't have it handy. Yeah. I sort of do the shows and then throw my notes out and then start the notes over again on a page. So it's like, I never really have it. Oh, thank you, Happy Beach. Good to see you. Hope you're doing well. The Saturdays you miss. Oh, you were camping. Well, I guess you're allowed to camp with your family. 70,000 was confirmed dead. Mike is saying, death proof. Thank you, Sean. Love the dinos. Hey, Ali. Mike is saying 70,000 was confirmed dead. I'll have to find it. If somebody wants to Google, you'll find it. I mean, maybe it's what you guys were saying there on TikTok. It was an article probably 3 weeks ago. And it was the latest sort of official estimate from whether it was NATO or whatever. Thank you, Chad. But it was one of the estimates that we would believe more so. 7120. So what? 70,000 Ukrainian dead. You're saying 120 Russian? Maybe. Yeah, I don't know. Any case, God, I don't even know. Kid Rock. Kid Rock's asking does the Lend-Lease Act apply to the aid U.S. is providing? I think it's really confusing. Sort of what aid the U.S. is giving via which vehicle. I have never fully understood that, right? As far as whether it's coming through the different, that Lend-Lease Act or other stuff. So I honestly don't know. Like I said, it's the different vehicles for the aid have kind of been a conundrum for me since this war started. Keep the mods in wine. Yeah. Thank you, Callum. I don't know, John. I mean, do you think we'll wake up one day and Russia has left Ukraine overnight? I mean, the thing that makes it difficult is if Putin gets overthrown, for example, overnight or whatever, gets disappeared, the Russians still aren't going to want to give up Crimea. And currently, they don't, Crimea, they've got a solid hold on right now. They may not if Ukraine's able to cut them off, which is what they're trying to do with the counteroffensive. Russia's hold on the new territories is going to be less, right? Because a lot of Ukrainians had to flee here. Thank you, Flower Lady. A lot of Ukrainians had to flee here to get out of here because the Russians took over in 2014. Thank you, Hazel. The land the Russians took just in the last year, you still got a ton of Ukrainians living here, much more tenuous hold the Russians have. So I could see the Russians, if the attacks are enough, thank you, Bonnie, feeling like they have to pull out some of these areas, maybe. But Crimea, I don't see them pulling out of unless there's a hell of a lot more pain, which means just that Ukraine is able to cut off Crimea by reaching the sea, which is what they're trying to do. Chris says, I know we are in talks with China about previous sanctions. Can't we say to them, you're helping Russia, we will up the sanctions? Yeah. I mean, there's certainly a risk of China turning around and sanctioning us, which is not good, right? I mean, that's a concern because we get a lot of our goods from China too, so I don't know. I mean, the U.S. is clearly talking to them, but I also think because of what's going on with Taiwan and stuff too, there's a really weird dance where we don't want to antagonize China, but at the same time, we realize, what are you doing? Huh? You're okay for the moment. My dog is making weird noises that sometimes are I want to play. Sometimes it means I have to go out. As she's over by the table, I'm going to guess this is still a I want the squeaky pig that's 3 feet away kind of noise, hopefully. Because if come on up. Only because when she's got to go out, then she's got to go out. But she shouldn't because I took her before the show. So hopefully she's okay. Once they break the land corridor and cut off the sea, yeah, I mean, that's the goal. Because basically, the idea with cutting off the land corridor is this. Russia is over here, so it provides these occupied territories right from Russia. And Russia is also right here, right across the water here. The Kerch Bridge is the bridge the Ukrainians keep hitting. And so Russia also provides here. So if they can cut this land bridge in two, either here or here, that means these regions, and especially this region, can now no longer get supplies from Russia this way. They can only get it across the bridge. Well, Ukraine's already been attacking the bridge, but if they're able to cut off the land here, then I think, thank you, user 2119, then I think they're going to go ballistic on this bridge and take it out in a big way. That means then these regions now have no more support. They can't get new troops. They can't get fuel. They can't get food. Mind you, they're trying to feed 70,000 troops or whatever it is. Not being able to get food is a big deal. 70,000 troops eat 210,000 meals a day. That's a hell of a lot. I mean, you don't just find it out of nowhere. So That's the idea of trying to cut off, creating a land bridge, reaching the sea. So let's hope, Do you think we'll see Russian refugees soon across Europe? That's funny. Well, we have. I mean, we've seen a million of them, when Putin tried to do the draft last year, when he said he was calling up a million, or what was it, calling up 300,000 Russian men, and a million of them fled for the border, so not enough though. I mean, we still, honestly, part of the problem I think is, so we've ample the European beaches and while there's, but it is, so, they don't need, they just on vacation, more. Any update on the Ukrainians pushing across? Not really. Thank you. I told you there are some reports that the Ukrainians came across and may have even circled some of the Russian troops there. So you is slowly across the river there as well. Yeah. So what else? Somebody haven't done that for a while. All right. What else, guys? That's interesting. Georgia had an insane economic boom last year from all the Russians escaping the mobilization. That's interesting. Is Anonymous still causing problems for Russia? We don't really know, Mike. That's a good question. We haven't really heard much about that. One would hope, but we haven't really heard about any big, hackings or anything else. Who's winning? I mean, Divine, it's kind of a weird question. And what I mean by that is in terms of giving an answer, because Russia is not doing well because we are now 550 days into this war. This war was supposed to be cakewalk. Russia should have won it in 2 weeks, right? It's now been a year and a half. That's not going well for Russia. Russia also doesn't seem to be getting more land in Ukraine. They wanted to get the whole country. Russia has lost half the land it held previously in Ukraine. Having said that, Russia still controls 17% of Ukraine. That's a big deal. Sorry, whatever's cooking in the kitchen is now going to cause my husband to go crazy. Oh my. All right. Well, if they're watching, open the doors in the kitchen, please. Oh my. I don't know, guys, what we're talking about. Oh, in terms of how Russia's doing. So part of the problem here is that Russia controls 17% a big deal. Okay. There's nothing to laugh at, right? So it's not like saying Russia has nothing. Russia still has 70% of Ukraine. That's a big deal. How do they get, sorry, I got really thrown off by the Ukrainians need to get their land back, and the Ukrainians is taking, let's flip the side here. So Russia's not doing great, but Russia still holds 70% of Ukraine. That's not bad. The Ukrainians are trying to get their land back. It's going very slowly, and you all know the arguments around that. So right now, it's not a tie, but it's both sides are almost on the edge of a pin or whatever it is, on a precipice for maybe they could do better or they could do a lot worse, right? And I think it's Ukraine especially is kind of in the middle here, where Ukraine could do incredibly well soon with this counteroffensive. Things are getting better, but at the same time, if it doesn't go well, then Ukraine might be stuck, but they're stuck losing 70% of their territory, but also, how does the war even stop, right? They're both going to keep killing each other. If I were Ukraine, I would absolutely do it. I'm not going to give up, right? So, and how does Russia pull out if Ukraine keeps fighting? So the war kind of just keeps going. Thank you, Aiden. As a war of attrition or whatever, it just keeps going, Anyway, it's very interesting. That's why I say, it's always kind of hard to answer who's winning, because you don't want to say Russia's losing because Russia does control 70% of Ukraine, but they're clearly not doing well. Thank you, Hazel. But I'm sorry, my final point here was there's no exit strategy for Russia either, because Russia can't just say, well, we control 17%. Woo, we're done. Well, Ukraine's going to keep fighting to get their land back. So Russia can leave and hold on to it. How are they going to hold on to the 17% when Ukraine keeps fighting to get it back? So Russia themselves are in a bit of a spot here, because how does Russia end the war? They can't, Anyway, Anyway, good. The fan, they heard me. Thank you from the kitchen. The fan is on upstairs. It's clearing up around here now. Good. We have this massive fan in the upstairs of our house, but it's like something out of the 1940s. It's amazing. And it just like, wow, incredibly fills up the house. Thank you, Grumpy, for the finger there. The finger. What when Crimea is back? That's a good question. I don't know. I'm looking here. Crimea is probably told maybe a little bit more. Is it 17%? Okay, Peter. I was looking at the map trying to like extrapolate. Yeah, so Crimea could be 17, like 1/5 of the total landmass Russia controls is 1/5, so, but it's important. It's important. I mean, Crimea to the Russians is important, but to the Ukrainians, obviously they want to get all their land back, but I think for them, Crimea is this, because the Russians took it first back in 2014, is this, holy grail that they're kind of going after, You got called a I'm not sure what you mean. Oh, an Enzi. I think you meant a New Zealander, Mark. I'm like, they called you a New Zealander today? Putin. Yeah. Oh my. Anyway. What else we got, guys? What else? The damn Kiwis. I'm thinking Enzis. I'm like, you get called an Enzi, a New Zealander. It made me laugh. Yes. Give me food says I'm an Aussie, so I'm allowed to tease the Kiwis. What's for tea? I did have tea. I've got my tea here, but I already had my tea earlier. So if I have any more, I'm putting it in the fridge till tomorrow. Dun, dun, dun. And then it'll be iced tea tomorrow. Will Ukraine get its kids back? They've been slowly getting kids back. I haven't really sort of told you guys the stories because quite literally it's like 12 kids, this kind of thing, that they get back. And I feel like it's not enough of a story. Dog is defending the house against, probably like a toddler walking across the street. But and I don't know what's for dinner tonight. No idea. But anyway, what else, guys? I don't know. Yep. Hi, Sasha. Thank you, Artur. Gracias. I'm going to guess. Are we giving tanks to Ukraine? Yes, they've not arrived yet, but they're supposedly the first American tanks were going to start arriving like at the end of the month. And today's the 28th. I mean, there's only, is it 30 days? I'm trying to remember. 30 days, April, January, November, 31 days. So we've got 3 days left. So I don't know, but they were supposed to get a couple American tanks by the end of the month. So that's true. Again, they could have gotten delayed a little. There's 31 total en route, but they could be getting those tanks really soon. Let's hope they do. No updates on the status of that. Nothing. No news about it. No news. 12 kids is still a story, but you know what I'm saying. It's when we're talking 16,000 kids or more, or much more have been kidnapped. I feel like 12 is nice, but it's not a big story. It just isn't. Will the F-16? Well, that's a good question. Thor is asking, will the F-16 be a game changer for Ukraine? Depends who you talk to. Some of the military guys who I respect, like General Hertling, they're kind of tamping down the F-16 thing. Hertling seems to think it's going to be a lot of difficulty to upkeep the to keep them running well. He thinks it's going to be very difficult. Some of the readings I've also have said it could take years for the Ukrainians to really master the F-16, meaning, you learn to fly it, but there's years of operating it to get really good, whatever. Other folks you talk to will tell you that there's, Callum was showing me a video. Or somebody else. Yeah, you showed me, Callum, a really good TikTok on this that somebody did. They were talking about the integration of the weapons that the F-16 has and how they're integrated with the F-16 itself. And some of these are weapons, I don't have any of them handy off the tip of my tongue, but some of them are weapons that we've already given Ukraine. And they've sort of jerry-rigged making the weapons work with the Ukrainian MiG fighter jets. But they're much smarter bombs if we link them into an F-16. One of them, what was the one, Callum? Are they harm missiles? I think it was the harm missiles, wasn't it? Yeah, he just wrote at the bottom, harm missiles. One of them was harm missiles that basically are the missiles you fire when a ground radar lights you up, right? So when the Russians turn on their ground radar to basically get ready to attack you, right? They turn on the radar finds you, they throw a missile at you. The current Ukrainian harm missiles they have from the US, they have to wait until the radar lights up and then they turn on their missile and their missile kind of goes after that target. It can be a much more complicated ways of doing it. They can basically, if it's integrated into their system, they could have the missiles ready to go, basically, and use, for example, the plane's own radar, so that the plane is sensing, not even the radar, but the plane sensing when the radar goes off, and the second the radar goes off, the plane send the missile, right? And it's not like the pilot having to say, bottom line is, but it is much, the weapon systems are basically interactive and interoperative with all the technology in the F-16. It makes them much smarter and it makes them easier to use and more not complicated, but just other possibilities of how you can use the weapons to go after the Russians that are smarter and a better chance of hitting them. That's the simplest way to putting it. Actually, I mean, it's good. Somebody's going to explain this. Surfos is going to say better than me. The current method is just lobbing one where they think the radar is and hoping it turns on. Okay, there you go. There you go. Whereas they can, yeah, right. Callum says they can be set to auto destroy. And I think auto destroy basically means either the missile itself or the plane is constantly looking for any radar. And as soon as the radar turns on, boom, it goes and gets it. But that is a system of having the missile communicating with the plane and everything else that the Ukrainians can't do otherwise. So anyway. And by the way, this is also super important because it also protects the F-16, right? I mean, the Ukrainians want to blow up the missiles on the ground to protect all of their aircraft, but also the fighter itself. And the F-16 is going to do a much better job of defending itself than the regular Ukrainian will, which means more Ukrainian pilots, and the Ukrainians are going to have less control of their airspace until they get the F-16s. So, but whether it's a game changer, I guess part of it's going to depend on, honestly, how good the Ukrainians are with them, are able to, they might be able to, I don't know. Are there any fighter pilots for hire? Yes. Oh, now I'm getting the look. All right. I'm keeping an eye on her. Oh, okay. Dog's got to pee. All right. You guys mind waiting a second? I told you I could always tell when the dog's I took her out before the show. She's at the door wagging and going, one quick second. I'll be back. Talk amongst yourselves. It's literally going to be 1 minute. All right, you. Of course you had to do this while I'm on. All right, come on. Come on. Come on. All right. Oh, well. When she's got to go, she's got to go. Anybody who watches my show knows the dog gets precedent or precedence always. Thank you, Jenny, for the gift there. Yeah. That's the way it is. So pilots for hire, yes. The Ukrainians, I believe I saw the Ukrainians put out the word a couple of weeks ago that they would be very interested in any former F-16 pilots joining them. The problem is, what would the U.S. do, right? Would Biden be willing to give the planes for American pilots to fly them or other NATO pilots to fly them? It doesn't have to be American. I don't think Biden would. I don't think he'd let them. First of all, I don't think Biden wants the planes there to start with. I think they're hoping to drag this out long enough that the war ends before the planes get there. That's my guess. I think there is zero chance he's going to want a NATO pilot, especially an American pilot in that plane, because that plane could cause. I can show you guys. My dog, I mean, she's cracking me up. My dog is sitting here. What are you doing? What are you doing, huh? What? I can't help you. I can't help you right now. I have to show you guys here. She's sitting here looking at me and she's squeaking her pig and just going, "Arr, arr." She's like trying to get me to, oh, stop. Oh my God. Honest to God. And she's squeaking it and going, "Arr, arr." Like, come on, Dad. You can tell the dog has basically had it. All right, please stop. Come on up. Come on up. Come on up. No. Oh God. And then she's picking up the pig and looking at me again. She's squeezing it again. Okay. In any case, I do not think that there's any chance that I know we're done. There's any chance that Biden's going to let a NATO pilot fly the. Thank you. All right. She gave up and she jumped on the chair next to me. All right. That's better. Yeah, I think there's zero chance. Biden's afraid escalation. If a NATO pilot ends up, that's the hell that means. Zero chance. Zero chance. Is it problematic to let U.S. pilots go into the war? No. Biden out. Because then it's American fighter pilots blowing up Russians. Is that just like Americans? Not to mention, as we talked about last week, you've got American tankers, driving tanks and blowing up Russians. I mean, we have had a hand in killing 70,000 Russian troops. At this point, we've got playing this game of, oh, we're not involved in the war. What are you talking about? We're not involved in the war. You know what I mean? Like, it's ridiculous, but we're still playing that game. So it's like, okay, whatever. I mean, honestly, and Putin too. Let Putin. And I go, what are you going to do? What are you going to do? You're going to drop a nuke? Seriously? I've got nukes. Thank you, Super Hornet. Anyway, no, I think they're gonna delay the F-16s, but we'll see. Anyway, what else, guys? Do you think when Ukraine gets Crimea back, Putin will be removed as ruler? Putin is increasingly in trouble. I mean, I think he really is. I will say this about the Prigozhin thing too. The Prigozhin thing was very interesting because, nobody thought there was any chance of a real rebellion or anything, right? And all of a sudden it happened, and it kind of did a little too well. You know what I mean? Like, nobody. Honestly, it reminds me a bit like Putin invading Ukraine, even though Americans certainly thought Putin was going to invade, but everyone thought it was going to go really quickly, and the Ukrainians were able to stop him. We underestimated the Ukrainians, and we also underestimated the ability of any kind of opposition in Russia to cause problems. And, they could have caused real problems. But, but no, I think Putin could be in trouble as far as, if the war keeps going like this, at some point. I mean, it just depends. It depends if people are going to stand up to him. Excuse me. It depends if they're going to stand up to him or not. It would be politically bad, but I mean, it's bad if an F-16 gets shot down anyway. Thor is saying F-16 pilots are superstars. It'd be bad politically if one got shot down, but it's bad if an F-16 gets shot down. It's bad anyway. I mean, that's going to be enough publicity right there, let alone some pilot no one's heard of has also been killed. But, I think the plane itself is the publicity, really. Russia only has one aircraft carrier. I didn't realize that. I didn't remember that, at least. What if Ukraine gave them temporary citizenship? The problem is Biden has to agree on these planes. Biden is absolutely going to have rules on who gets to fly the planes. And I'm telling you, I think, sure, Biden is going to say only Ukrainian pilots, and Ukraine is not going to want to screw it up by saying, well, let's make you a Ukrainian pilot, and we just won't tell Biden. Then you lose access to any kind of future help from the Americans potentially, right? So I don't see that happening. They won't stand up to him. Russians are sitting. Oh, okay. Irina is saying, as far as Putin, the Russians won't stand up. On their behinds, as we've said, like Russia's gone hundreds of years with bad authoritarian governments, and not only do they not like overthrow those governments, look back at them fondly. I mean, Russians are the ones that look back at the czars and go, those were the days, right? And they look back at the Soviet Union and go, oh, those were the days. I mean, the Soviets were horrible. And life in the Soviet Union, they had their watermelons and their television sets would explode. Kid you not. I always loved the story about the watermelons. It was ridiculous. People would get drunk on toothpaste. Actually, they probably still do in the Soviet Union. They would literally eat toothpaste because it had alcohol in it, and they'd get drunk. The problems they had in the Soviet Union, horrific country. And they look back on it fondly, and they think Stalin was great. Stalin, who killed 20, 30, 40 million people. Oh, great man. His own people, mind you, his own people. But so, yeah, I would not count on the Russians to overthrow Putin. But what gets interesting is the security apparatus, right? The intelligence, the military folks, them looking at Putin and thinking, right, is this guy worth it? That's a possibility. But it doesn't mean they're going to get any. In other words, they're not overthrowing him for freedom. They're overthrowing him because he's a jerk who's doing a bad job. He's a bad dictator. So they overthrow him in exchange for a better dictator. That could happen. That could happen for sure. Night, Dave. The aircraft carrier's gone on fire half a dozen times. That's funny. That's funny. That's funny. All right, guys. Anything else, or should we call it quits here? Do you think Putin will be looked back on fondly? Depends by whom. Not by normal Americans, by Russians. I mean, look at like Gorbachev. Russians don't necessarily look back on Gorbachev fondly. For example, they look at Gorbachev as the guy who gave away the shop, right? He closed up the Soviet Union, blah, blah, blah. And we look at Gorbachev as, unless you're like Baltic, but most of us look at Gorbachev as this guy that helped to dissolve the Soviet Union, right? But the Russians don't. I should say the Russians look at him angrily as the guy who dissolved the Soviet Union, because remember, those were the good old days. So, I mean, in many ways, it's not unlike some political parties in the West trying to claim, the 1950s, those were the good days, and if they could blame you for getting rid of the 1950s, they would. And Putin is blaming whoever, Gorbachev, for getting rid of the good old days of communism. Because to them, which they're not wrong, Russia was strong. The Soviet Union was feared worldwide, right? And they were, but they were feared worldwide because they were horrific dictators. But yeah, so. All right, guys, I think we're heading to the end here. I will do a quick summary. I don't think I'm going to do Discord tonight just because I can tell with my hunger. I had a snack before the show too. I'm still hungry. But I will do a recap. Don't forget that, as I said, we've got a lot of auction items up. Go check them out on the Discord. They're up through Wednesday, and then Wednesday is the day that all the auctions come due, final bids, and then I put up new ones, usually on Thursday. So go check it out. Thank you, Crazy American Overseas. But let me give a quick summary. So today is day 550 of Putin's 3-day special military operation. Offensive update. Basically, the Ukrainians have taken the town of Robotine. Thank you, user 2119, in southern Ukraine. And next up is them going after Tokmak. I mean, Tokmak will come. It's a big city that's about 18 miles south. They're not going for it next. They've got to go for smaller towns first, then Tokmak, and then from Tokmak, the big prize is going after Melitopol. If they hit Melitopol, then they've cut the occupation in half. As always, the next 3 weeks are going to be interesting for that, because that's the timetable. We're hoping to see some more significant movement from Ukraine. There's been significant movement already, but also, come October 1st, starts to begin the rainy season more or less, and that becomes difficult for Ukraine. I was telling you about an interesting development with a neo-Nazi leader of the Russian military who is in Finland. The Finns asked him at Ukraine's request, and Ukraine wants him extradited. And the neo-Nazi group, which is a private military group in Russia, akin to the Wagner group, basically similar to them, has now said they're not going to fight anymore if Putin doesn't get their leader free. But Putin doesn't really have any say in it, so that's going to be interesting. And these guys are a very important fighting force in the counteroffensive right now near Robotine, which is great. Oh, hello! Wow, from Mariupol, really? Okay. Nice to see you. Someone's saying hello from Mariupol. Wow. There was a big Ukrainian attack this weekend at a Russian airbase in Kursk, which caused damage to a number of Russian fighter jets. Moscow's airport shut again several times this weekend as the Ukrainians fired drones at that city. Kupiansk in the northeast, the Russians have got about 100,000 troops there and are trying to have a breakthrough up there to throw the Ukrainians kind of off their balance, basically, with a counteroffensive. Russian investigators concluded that Prigozhin did, in fact, die in the crash. They say the DNA evidence proves it. A second grain ship or cargo ship has escaped from Ukraine by hugging the boundary waters of the NATO countries. And Zelensky saying this is a model for how Ukraine grain shipments can continue in the future. Another article on ATACMS, which are the missiles Ukraine wants and defense experts that Ukraine should get from the United States that Biden is afraid would be escalatory, whatever the hell that means. An expert group looking at Russian sanctions found that of 174 foreign components in Russian drones that are used to attack Ukraine, 60% of those foreign components came via China. Very interesting. Ukraine's state gas and oil company says they have accumulated enough gas in storage to get them in the reserves to get them through the winter when Russia is going to attack and take out their power. And finally, for Ukrainian elections, the presidential elections 2014, I think, or elections across the board, Zelensky says it would be impossible to have them unless Ukraine gets some funding because the elections are going to cost in the billions on elections when fair argument. So we'll see what happens with that. All right. Thank you, Hardly. Thank you, guys. Have a good evening. I'm going to go and see what's in the kitchen, and then we will meet again tomorrow. Okay. Tomorrow, 6 p.m. Eastern Time, US. I do this every day, Monday to Friday. So set your clock by it. I also do my TikTok videos, so go check those out. I've got a couple up today, although it's about things we talked about today, but I sort of expand a little. So do check those out. And otherwise, I do go to Discord as well. So I check Discord all day long. So if you want to chat on Discord or just leave me a question, I will always answer questions on Discord. So if you're in one of the chat areas like Ukraine or whatever, do an @Aravosis or whatever my name is there, and I'll respond to you. So good, definitely check. And Discord's free. Remember, you can become a member and help me out, but it is free, so you're not restricted there. So do go check it out. All right, guys. Then thank you. Have a good evening. Thank you, mods, for going after the trolls, and I will see you guys again tomorrow at 6 p.m. Eastern. All right. Good night, everybody. Thank you, by the way, Europeans. I always appreciate you guys hanging in there. It's late for you. So thank you. All right. See you guys.